And then you get this extraordinary opportunity, like 2 years after your diagnosis, from Bell Media. Bell Media, that's up in Canada, I guess. And they come and they say, how would you like to host a primetime radio show for us? And you're like, hell yes, right? I mean, like you must be excited about this.
Yeah, I was very excited, for a number of reasons. As you noted, because it was just a couple years after cancer, and it was just a good feeling to be like, I never knew if I was going to be able to use my voice again, to now being able to use it, on this platform. So I was very excited about that. And I was also very excited, Megyn, because of the timing. George Floyd was just killed at this point in 2020 in the summer. And Black Lives Matter was all over the news, all over the media. And there was this sort of groupthink, this moral panic that was taking hold, where it seemed like everyone was afraid to disagree with them over some really important issues, including some of the family stuff that we talked about, by the way, since Black Lives Matter has been pretty openly against the nuclear family. Mm-hmm. So when I got this chance to host a radio show, I'm thinking, wow, like I get to actually provide a voice to push back on some of that stuff, because it's really important. And because I was seeing all these images coming out of Washington, D.C., there's a church set on fire, and other parts of the United States, police stations are set on fire. In St. Louis, a black cop was killed. And I felt like we needed some course correction. We needed to balance out the conversation. So yeah, I started off very excited about that job.
And then, I mean, we've heard the story before. Now, I will admit, it doesn't often happen to a black man with your backstory. I mean, it's just egregious, but we've heard the story before. Then once they got to hear your more heterodox views, right, that you did not sound like Don Lemon, you sounded more like Jason Riley, they were not so hot on you suddenly, Jamil.
Yeah, as the months went by, it started to feel like there was an expectation from some of the, senior management at the company who managed the iHeartRadio talk network in Canada. And they it was almost like, you aren't the black guy we were hoping for, right? Like it was this sort of,
if you could just say these other things, everything would work out great.
Yeah. Like, and in some way, I think it's because, and I would imagine you may have experienced this at times in your career too, Megyn, as a woman, where there's this sort of sense of, as the workplace becomes more diverse, or as a radio station or a TV station becomes more diverse, there are people who think they sort of get to control what the new person gets to say. So in my case, as a black person, there were people who seemed to think they knew what a black man with a radio show was supposed to think about all these different issues. And when I did not go in the direction they wanted, it just built up over time, this sort of resentment and this frustration towards me, which started to boil over about a year in, where it became obvious that, when we were approaching our National Independence Day in Canada, for example, they wanted us to go on the radio and repeat Justin Trudeau style talking points, apologizing for our country, calling our country racist. And I just wasn't willing to do that. I mean, my story, Megyn. How many countries in the world does a kid get declared illiterate in high school and then get a chance to change his life? In most parts of the world, if you screw up as a kid like I did, you're toast. You don't get a second chance. And so how could I be so ungrateful, so resentful to my own country? And just this media company, Bell Media, just was full of senior management who couldn't understand that.
So how did that get communicated to you? Do they sit you down and say, here's what we want you to say? Or like they suggested to you? Like, how do you know what they want you to say? And how do you know they're unhappy with what you did say?
Well, sometimes it is sort of unsaid vibes you can get from people, right? Sure. And I think we all have experienced that at work, where someone's just giving you looks or treating you in a way where it's clear you're not being valued. But there were some moments where it became very clear. So for example, we were actually asked in the summer of 2021 to air clips the day before our Independence Day, decrying our country as racist, going on the radio and playing clips from all sorts of activists and academics, in my view, unfairly criticizing our country. And, I didn't do that. I just refused to do so. There were other times where we were asked as employees to join equity consultations where we were going to be divided up based on our gender, our race, our sexuality. I think some of us probably would have had to attend 3 or 4 of those meetings to cover all of our identities. And I just refused to participate. And I said things to them in emails where I said, hey, like, I understand you're doing this diversity, equity, inclusion thing, but could we also think about diversity of thought? And I would get no replies to that. They just refused to talk to me about those sorts of things.
So no. Okay, got it.
Yeah, exactly.
What do they want the mixed race people to do? Like, if you could just have the white affinity group and the black affinity group sitting right next to each other, that would really help me out. I'll just sit on the little line there and I'll please everybody.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like when they bring this stuff into the workplace, this diversity, equity, inclusion stuff, it forces you to be at odds with your employer if you don't go along to get along. Yeah. And in good conscience, I just couldn't participate in these things. So you could feel the tension growing because I was not being welcomed to share my perspective on these issues.
And they're making you think about your race, which is not necessarily something you want to think about while you're doing your job. Or in my case, your lady parts or your sexuality. Maybe you don't want to be thinking about that while you're at the office. Maybe you want to be thinking about inflation or the trucker convoy or something other than your immutable characteristics, which used to have no place in the workforce.
Exactly. And that's, the right that we should all have, regardless of your background, your gender, your identity, you should be able to make those choices of how much do you want that to be part of your experience at work. And these big corporations are giving you no choice. They're forcing this political agenda on all of us.
So how big, like in the United States, we have so many amazing, as I said, heterodox thinkers within the Black community, mixed race, whatever, who they do take a beating. Jason, we've been talking about Larry Elder. He was called the blackface of white supremacy when he ran for governor of California. Clarence Thomas is called, an Uncle Tom all the time, Supreme Court Justice. I could go on. And Candace Owens, they take it in a way that's especially cruel and diminishing. So what's it like in Canada? Do you have like a strong contingent of, Black thinkers who just refuse to go along to get along?
Well, we do sort of under the radar. We have those members of our community, academics, conservative activists, thoughtful, heterodox thinkers. Unfortunately, above the radar, and I don't mean this to make myself seem more important than I am, I was kind of the only one. We have a few people who are politicians, Black politicians from the Conservative Party, who are insanely valuable. Leslyn Lewis, Casey Maddu, for example. But in the media space, it just is me. And that's why I was such a target. Like, I was the only person from the Black community to have anything but a far left perspective in mainstream media. And that's one of the reasons why I've gotten more support, frankly, from American media since I got fired than Canadian media, because a lot of people in Canadian media are afraid they're going to lose their job if they even talk about what happened to me. There is a very repressive culture when it comes to true diversity of thought in Canadian mainstream media. And that's one of the reasons why in Canada we have such rosy, glowing coverage of someone like Justin Trudeau.
Mm-hmm. So it's so strange to me because I guess it was Bell Media for whom you worked, but they're connected in some way to iHeart Canada because iHeart America, they're very pro free speech. That's who produced Rush Limbaugh for all those years and stood by him. And so I guess there's obviously a dichotomy between the way the American group and the Canada group work. So how long did it take for them, Bell Media, to come to you and say, you're fired?
Well, it took them about a year and a half. As we got close to the end of last year, right before Christmas time, some of the executives just got a lot more aggressive with trying to change the content of my show, including sending some accusatory emails, which I still to this day can't believe they put in writing. And this is one of the reasons why I'm allowed to go out and talk about this, and they can't sue me because I could prove everything I'm saying. They put in writing their desire to question my commitment to diversity and inclusion because I would talk about things like Dave Chappelle or J.K. Rowling and their views on gender ideology, because I refuse to condemn other people in the Black community who are unvaccinated. Like, they really tried to push a certain political agenda on me in writing. And I just rejected it and I refused. So they pulled me off the air and they said, oh, in the new year, we'll have a meeting, we'll work out these issues. I showed up to that meeting in early January, and the people, the executives, the management who were supposed to be there to talk about diversity and inclusion, they didn't even show up. Instead, it was a human resources.
I've got to ask you, are these white people?
They are all white people, yes.
Of course they
are.
All
white liberals.
Of course. It's perfect. Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.